You just messed with the wrong virgin.
Hey guys, Dustin here. Welcome to another episode of Horroritis. Today we're talking about The Final Girls from 2015. So first, let me explain something for those of you who may not be familiar with what a final girl is. In just about every slasher movie, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween, whatever, there's always one girl who makes it to the end and is responsible for killing off the bad guy. At least for that movie. That girl is the final girl, and it's pretty standard slasher movie trope. So with that out of the way, let's get to it. The movie starts with a trailer for a slasher movie called Camp Bloodbath. It's appropriately cheesy with bad acting, bad dialogue, and even the voiceover guy has terrible lines.
They won't be singing Kumbaya. They'll be screaming Kumbano.
As the trailer fades out, we see that it was Max Cartwright watching the trailer on her phone while waiting for her mother. Amanda, Max's mom and one of the stars of Camp Bloodbath, shows up and she's upset because she's sure that she failed an audition and all anyone seems to know her from is Camp Bloodbath, which she isn't too proud of.
Honestly, if you ever become an actor, don't ever do a slasher flick.
You wouldn't catch me dead in a movie.
So they drive away, and on the way home they get into an accident and Amanda dies. 3 years later, Max is living with her aunt and still more or less trying to get herself together. Her best friend Gertie picks her up and they meet their friend Chris at a diner to study. Gertie's stepbrother Duncan, a huge fan of Camp Bloodbath, happens by and sees them studying. He comes in, shows Max a flyer for a double feature of Camp Bloodbath and Camp Bloodbath 2. As the daughter of one of the stars of the first movie, having Max there would be a big deal to Duncan and the Camp Bloodbath fans.
The mathematicians were so excited when I told them that Amanda Cartwright's daughter was my sister's best friend.
Stepsister.
Why'd you say that? That's so hurtful.
Since the double feature falls on the anniversary of Max's mom's death, she says no. But after a bit of wheeling and dealing, she finally agrees to go. At the theater, they meet up with Vicky, who's Chris's ex-girlfriend and Max's ex-friend, and they go in to watch the movies. While the movie is playing, two guys are passing around a bottle of liquor, and in a scene that feels very Final Destination, we see the bottle fall and the liquor spill out and run across the floor just as another guy lights a cigarette, and a hot ash falls into the liquor, setting the whole theater on fire. The five friends head for the screen after Duncan says that there's an exit behind it. Max uses a dropped machete that was part of someone's costume to cut through the screen, and the five of them go through. Now this gets us close to about 20 minutes into the movie, so let's talk about what makes this movie good. For anyone afraid of spoilers, you can jump to the end where I'll recap in a fairly spoiler-free way, but until then. This movie is basically a horror version of The Last Action Hero. If you haven't seen it, a kid gets sucked into a Schwarzenegger movie, and they spend roughly 2 hours and 10 minutes making fun of all the action movie tropes, while still using the same tropes to make it an action movie. It's the same thing here, except horror instead of action. So once they're all pulled into the movie, a van with three of the stars pulls up and asks for directions. Everyone's too flabbergasted to speak, except for Duncan.
Hey, do you guys know the way to Camp Bluefinch?
Tina.
Yeah?
So the van drives on. 92 minutes later, the van pulls up again, and they're asked for directions. This time, Chris points them in the right direction, and they drive on. Another 92 minutes later, and the van pulls up yet again. At this point, Duncan realizes that they have to follow the plot in order to get through this, which means surviving a 92-minute slasher movie by just following around the final girl until she makes it to the end. So they pose as counselors and ride to camp. From there, we meet all the slasher stereotypes. You got Kurt the jock, Tina the slut, Mimi the hippie, Blake the black guy, Nancy the shy girl, and Paula the final girl, who in this case doubles as the badass. By the way, if you happen to have kids, and you might recognize the jock as the voice of Pizza Steve from Uncle Grandpa.
How about you go suck a turd?
Classic. But enough of all that. What's the important part of a slasher flick? The slasher. And this one hits all the tropes too. His name is Billy Murphy, and during a flashback, we learn that he went to the same camp in the 50s. He was picked on for being ugly and eventually ended up in the hospital with third-degree burns all over his body from a prank involving firecrackers. Now, while he's in the hospital that just kind of looks like a cabin at the camp, he decides to go on a revenge spree, so he fashions himself a mask out of wood and hacks up the kids responsible. The beautiful thing about this flashback is that when they start telling the story, Max and her friends get sucked into the flashback too because it was part of the movie, and while they're there, Gertie gets splattered with blood. When the flashback is over, Gertie's still covered in blood. This causes the characters who weren't in the flashback to freak out and run. Kurt and Paula speed off in a car, which they promptly wreck and die. This leaves the rest to figure out how to survive without a final girl to follow around, minus Duncan, who at this point has confirmed that you actually can die in the movie.
I'm not dead.
Duncan, you're alive!
While they try to come up with a plan, they decide it's best to make sure that Tina can't get naked, since in the movie, she's scripted to do a striptease, and as soon as she takes off her shirt, Billy comes running. Yet another slasher trope that is all too familiar.
But why does he hate my boobs? Because they're not big.
And once the characters become self-aware and realize that they don't actually exist, they can start to experience parts of the narrative that they couldn't before, like flashbacks and slow-mo. But where this movie really succeeds is with the relationship between Max and Nancy, because Nancy was played by Max's mom. So the entire time she has to interact with this person who looks and sounds exactly like her mother, but who isn't. And what's worse, she knows that Nancy is scripted to die, and you can see that it affects Max every time she looks at Nancy.
Oh, hi. I'm Nancy. What's your name?
In a movie so full of slasher in-jokes and gore and legitimately funny moments, they manage to work in serious emotional conflict, and it works perfectly. So if you jumped over the spoilers, let me just sum up why this movie is good. It makes fun of your typical slasher movie tropes while using those same tropes to give you an 80s style slasher movie with a meta twist. The characters are genuinely likable, and the effects are pretty good. Even the CGI was used in a way that doesn't pull you out of the story. I would absolutely recommend this movie. Hands down. So that's my review for The Final Girls. If you haven't seen this movie, go watch it now. If you have seen this movie, go watch it again, because it is genuinely funny. If you like this review or just found this video entertaining in any way, go ahead and give me a thumbs up and share this video to your friends. If you haven't subscribed already, be sure to hit that subscribe button, because I've got more videos coming to you very, very soon. So, as always, I'm Dustin, this was Horroritis, and until next time...
That is not corn syrup, that is... Oh god, that's blood.